Welcome to Jersey Matters. We come to you from Trenton this week. In a moment, I will go inside the State House to interview the Speaker of the Assembly, Craig Coughlin. We are recording this interview on a day that the Wall Street Journal released an interview that rocked the State House. It was with Katie Brennan, who says she was sexually assaulted when she worked for the Phil Murphy for Governor campaign by another staffer, and she tried to tell the governor about it, but couldn't get a meeting. Both of the staffers were hired to be part of the administration. Al Alvarez from School Development has since resigned. Katie Brennan is still here and says she never got justice. And now, with that as our backdrop, here is our interview with the Speaker of the New Jersey Assembly, Craig Coughlin. New Jersey Speaker of the Assembly, Craig Coughlin. Sir, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Our pleasure to be here.
You recently announced a sexual harassment policy for the Assembly. The timing couldn't have been better for that. Could you explain your policy?
Well, I think the timing is always the right time to do the right thing. So back in January, or after I became the Speaker, we looked at the policy that had existed. It's been in place since 2009. And we recognized that the things have changed and that we need to update those policies as we go along. And so we began the work of putting together what I believe is the strongest sexual harassment and anti-discrimination policy that the state has had. But we made sure we got it right. And the policy does several things. It sets out very clear standards of what constitutes sexual harassment, what constitutes discrimination. It provides for avenues for people to report those things, which are more expansive and inclusive than we had in the past. It sets out the fact that we're going to be transparent in handling those claims and what happens when they are concluded. Protects the victims, because the victim would have the ability to say, I don't want this released, because there's sometimes when victims do not. And we need to respect that. We don't want to make anybody a victim twice. And then in September at the voting session, we adopted that policy, and that's in effect now. Because people ought to know that when they come to work for the state of New Jersey, well, at least for the Assembly, and the Senate has adopted it as well.
Now let's expand it, because it should be when you come to work for the state of New Jersey, shouldn't it? Shouldn't it just be with the Assembly? And they talked about
we have to, we did our policy for our House.
I understand.
And the Senate did it for.
And you did what you could do, and you had and by every account, it was a weak policy in the past, and you strengthened the policy. So you saw a weakness, and you made it better. You've got a sexual assault claim now in the governor's office. Was their policy weak in the past?
Well, I mean, as I've read the accounts of the stories, just as everybody else has, I don't have any information beyond what I've read in the press. And what I've read is abhorrent and more unimaginable. Today's Wall Street Journal story is more unimaginable than I could have ever anticipated. So when we're talking about the hiring policy, I haven't reviewed yet the hiring policy of the state of New Jersey, but we should be making sure that does get reviewed. We should make sure that we have the strongest policies we can to prevent those things. Now, if I read the articles are correct, then the conduct that occurred was prior to being an employee. It went to when it becomes something that touches upon the state, it has to do with those hiring policies.
But it does
not the alleged criminal act.
No, I get it. It happened during the campaign. It didn't happen when they were hired by the state. But it does call into question, A, the hiring policy, and the protocol that the governor says was fired. You have oversight over the governor's office, so does the Senate. Do you think you should get involved?
Well, I think this isn't a story that candidly becomes worse every day. But the new facts and things like that become available. I think we are. My leadership team in the Assembly and are committed to making sure that we address in the appropriate way anything that does not do what is right by people who make claims. And so we'll continue to do what we think is best in terms of developing policies, passing laws. We'll look at what makes sense as we go forward, and until the facts are all out, I think we're going to make sure that we're on top of it, and that we'll make the right decision.
And then one last question, because the facts, you're right, you have to be careful because there is going to be a criminal prosecution, but that has nothing to do with how the state handles these claims and what the state does. And this woman says that she came to the governor and she came to the first lady, and she feels like she's not getting justice. And when she talks about not getting justice, she's not talking about prosecutors, she's talking about the state. So I think a lot of people's eyes are looking now to the government to see how they're going to handle this. So are you going to call for legislation? Would you call for hearings?
Well, I think one thing that is clear is it seems that her cry for justice, her voice was never heard. So we're going to do what we need to do to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Wonderful. Well, and what does that mean?
That means we're going to work. If we think there should be legislation, we'll do legislation. If we think that it's right to revise policies, we're going to recommend those.
What about hearings?
Well, I think we'll have to work through to see where we're at in that process.
I want to move on to minimum wage, because we understand now from press reports that minimum wage won't be dealt with until next year.
The goal is to make sure that working class people in New Jersey don't have to struggle, or we do what we can to avoid them having to struggle day in and day out to make ends meet, to decide between buying medicine and then buying dinner. We're going to work through that. There are issues, there are suggestions. There are a lot of people who want exceptions to that, to the $15 an hour minimum wage.
So the holdup's just in the timing?
No, it's not. There's not a holdup at all. What there is a thoughtful process that's going on. Because it's a more complicated issue than it would seem on its face. On its face, it seems, well, you're going to take it to $15 an hour. How do you do that? Just make it $15 an hour, right? Pass the legislation, sign it. But the reality is you do need, and I think we all recognize that there has to be. We can't make it onerous on the implementation to the business community. We have to be mindful of that. What we don't want to do is we don't want people losing their jobs or reducing their hours, right? So we need to probably phase it in. The question is, how many years is that phasing going to take? Are there exceptions for, it's been raised that there should be training exceptions or exceptions for young people. So those are the kinds of things that are being worked through, not because there's a delay, but because we want to get it right.
So you have no doubt it's going to happen?
I have no doubt that there will be a bill that will raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and I think that will happen within the next couple of months in terms of the bill being up for consideration.
You seemed to grimace when I said next year. It's going to be pushed off to next year.
Well, it's, the calendar goes pretty fast. It's already the middle of October. It seems like it was summer the other day. So yeah, look, it could be, I would say that certainly by the beginning of next year we will do it.
I want to talk to you about New Jersey Transit and your new hunger initiative, and we'll talk about that in the next segment when we continue our conversation with Speaker of the Assembly Craig Coughlin, when Jersey Matters continues right after this. We'll continue our conversation with Speaker Coughlin in just one moment, but I wanted to point out that, as we said at the beginning of the interview, we recorded this on Monday. The very next day, the Speaker, along with Senate President Steve Sweeney, announced they would hold public hearings into the allegations of sexual assault by Katie Brennan and the hiring procedures of the governor's office. We'll continue our conversation with Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin right after this.